Welcome to today's episode of Financial Fluency. Today I have Cassie Parks, who is a best-selling author and money mindset coach. Thanks for joining me, Cassie.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So I was just reading through your bio, and it says you used to have a corporate job and you learned money mindset tools. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey getting here to where you are now? What happened?
Yeah, definitely. I did have a corporate job. Even before that, one of the places I struggled in my life was like, I wanted to make $100,000, but I didn't see that was possible. Like I went to college for psychology, actually dropped out of college because one day I looked up and it was like, all you could get was a $12 an hour job with a degree. And I'm like, I have that now. Like I make more than that as a waitress. What am I, so I had this moment when I was about 19 where I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Because what I love is never going to, the way I saw it then, is never going to afford me what I want. And so took some time off and got back into things and found a coaching process that I liked. And then I really started to work on my own money mindset because I realized like that was where it was. I got introduced to a couple of things and learned about changing your thoughts and beliefs and was like, okay, I could actually change this and maybe it'll look different, right? Maybe I'm not going to go get a traditional job with a BA in psychology, but I can create what I want. And so I worked on my money mindset as I worked my corporate job, and which I got in the middle of all this, and just kept working it and till I was able to leave my corporate job and focus on my business. And I did that by leveraging really my mindset and my intuition to invest in real estate and following that path of passive income so that I could pay my bills, so that I could leave. Because I knew from a previous experience that I don't do well if I gotta just go hustle like in my business full on. I quit a lot of jobs when I was younger to do this one thing that I thought was gonna be it. And it was actually working for a financial services company. And I just wasn't great at, I just didn't have the tools and I didn't feel good when I didn't have an income. So that's why I did it that way. So that's where I started.
So the real estate investment, tell us a little about that. How did that work?
Yeah. So I always wanted passive income, like probably most of your listeners. And I just started real estate. My mom had real estate, but it was more of like this, I don't know, she just had it as a wealth tool, right? We never really talked about it, but she had a couple of properties. And so I was like, well, I should do that. But I did it with just like, well, this is a long-term strategy. But the more I changed my mindset and started studying different things, the more I was like, oh, okay, there's $300 a month of passive income. And the more I stepped into this mindset of somebody who has enough money to not have to go to work every day, it was really crazy. Like other opportunities for real estate just popped in to my life, and I was able to build up my portfolio enough to pay my bills.
So this is getting straight up rentals, traditional rentals. Like, are you doing condos? Are you doing apartments? What are you doing?
Yeah. So, I started with like half duplexes because I started because when I started to change my money mindset and realize where I wanted to invest my money, I had this big house that at one time I had roommates and they'd all moved on with their lives. And I'm like, I don't need this house. So I actually, it was a time when the market had dipped and I moved down the street to this smaller house that was about $500 less a month. And then I rented that house. So that's how I started. And then eventually what I found for me, is then I changed to condos because that was just my sweet spot. I liked condos better. It felt better to me. That was those people were my age. I liked renting to them. So I switched everything to downtown Denver condos. Yeah. And then I've since sold and reinvested in other things. But yeah, so it's kind of progressive. It was just sort of finding what worked and then really what I call like finding your sweet spot. And then as I did that, I found like my sweet spot was those condos. Like some people don't want to own small studio condos. I loved it because there was less to clean up if somebody made a mess.
That's good. And I feel like a lot of people, especially, okay, so I've listened to some podcasts. There's one called like Bigger Pockets or something that's for real estate investing. And my sister has quite a few rental properties, and I have friends who have rental properties. My husband and I have thought about it. We thought when we sold up and left our ranch, that was what we were going to do, was get rental properties. But the cattle market dipped and the real estate market really shot up this last year.
Yeah.
And we held off, and I was like, I don't know. I feel like we'd be paying too much right now. But I feel like a lot of people see big barriers, including me, to getting into the rental market. For one thing, you need down payments. You can't as easily get those no down payments or very small down payment loans without the mortgage insurance and all that. Like, how did you just be like, rental? Is it because your mom had rentals that you were just like, I can do rentals? I think a lot of people see a block.
I think that's part of it, is I had seen her, like, it wasn't a big deal. Like, my mom didn't have this story about how hard it was. Like, a lot of people are like, oh no, because it'll be terrible. And I had helped her, like, clean up houses. I had spent days, in my, teenage years helping her clean up houses. And so it was a lot of work at the moment, but I remember we had a conversation, sometime where it was like what those houses were worth and what she paid for them. And I'm like, oh, that really wasn't that much work. Right. And so I did go into it with more of a story of like, oh, this pays off. Right. In my mindset, I knew like this will pay off in the long run. I knew that it would be like, I knew it was going to be work. Like, I didn't go in thinking like, oh, this is just going to be like, I knew sometimes I would have to do work, or I'd have to choose to pay someone else to do it. And so I spent a lot of, in my corporate job, we worked a 980 schedule. And so I had every other Friday off. I spent a lot of my Fridays off painting or cleaning, right? Cleaning the carpets or organizing the contractor. But like, I knew that was going to pay off. And then as time went on, I really, I invest for a cash on cash return. So I'm like, okay, if I put 20,000, I want to make at least $200 a month after all expenses. And so that's really how I kind of would go into it and would help with my money mindset, is like, okay, I'm like, this is an investment. Like, if the numbers don't work, I got really good at saying like, no, I'm not going to invest there.
So, and even just pulling together the 20 to 50 to 80, I mean, depending on how big a place you're duplex, is it a triplex? Is that a thing? I don't even know.
That is a thing. Yeah, that's a thing. A quad, a like I feel like there's any combination of number of places that you can find. Yeah.
Right. So just pulling together the down payment, was that difficult for you to do, or did your corporate job help you with that? Had you always been a good saver?
I hadn't always been a good saver, but when I made the decision, like, I was going to be financially independent, and I talk a lot about this in some of my early work. Like, I talk a lot about investing in your happiness. And once I mastered investing in my happiness versus, this is my thing. I would go to the store and I'd fill up like that bag off the clearance rack, right? Like, of crap that I was never going to wear, but like, I got that quick hit high off of it. Or I'd go to Target and spend $200 on things like I didn't really need or want, right? But it was like that habit.
Add up to $200?
Yeah, how did it happen? And so really, when I started changing my money mindset, made the decision about where I was going, I kind of naturally stopped doing those things. And then I had more money, and I made decisions like to leave the bigger house to save $500 a month. And what really happened, it was interesting. When I first outlined the course that we're going to talk about later, I had this aha, and I was like, how much did I actually spend living expenses last year? And I went and I added it up, and I had lived on like $24,000, including rent. And I was like, wow. And I was happy. Like, I was happy. I was getting facials. I was getting massages. I loved where I lived. It was a studio apartment, but I loved it. It was in the middle of downtown. I went out to nice dinners every, like $100 dinners. It wasn't like I felt like I was sacrificing, but it was really because when I look back, I learned to just invest in what makes me happy. So to answer, that was kind of a long answer to your question, but what happened is then I ended up with a big like pile of money so that it was available when I needed to make a $17,000, $20,000 or a $30,000 down payment on another one of my properties. Yeah,
that's impressive, because I do think that's a big barrier to a lot of people, thinking like, oh yeah, real estate. My uncle, my grandpa, who was in the military, bought houses and kept them, and then when he retired, he had 6 property. I hear these stories of people thinking like that's a good idea, but it does seem hard to get into. And I know nowadays a lot of people are taking advantage of the Airbnb part of things.
Yeah,
you may not have to actually like have an entire separate rental. You can do a portion of your house, or do your garage, or things like
all
that
these.
well.
I know. That's such a cool opportunity, because you almost don't have to save up unless you need to like convert the garage or something. But most people have potential, like right there. Like I have a friend in Denver, and her parents like converted their basement to a like a condo or whatever, but they don't use it. So she'll rent out her 2 bedrooms. She'll go stay there for the weekend, you know, and she's like, I'm paying for my backyard. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know?
that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, and actually just I'm like Uber too and Lyft, you know, there are all these ways. It's so interesting to see how new technology comes up and then like a whole economy revolves around it. Like the woman who comes and helps clean here sometimes, one of her other jobs is managing Airbnbs for a doctor who doesn't have time to do it. So she checks people in, checks people out, cleans up in between. And I was like, that job didn't exist not that long ago. You know?
I know. And it's so cool. Like I love what exists now that's like flexible and that's like, right? Like you mentioned Uber or Lyft, like, so for somebody who wants to like get into real estate, if they do need that $10,000, like, you know, they can commit, okay, I'm going to do for a year and figure out how many hours, you know, and they can do it when it feels good. Right. And they don't have to commit to a whole 20 an hour part-time job. I love that.
Yeah, that's true. So that's a good point when we're looking at sort of like how to amass enough to invest in something.
Yeah.
So many options that we didn't used to.
Yes.
Well, that's awesome. So I kind of off-tracked your story with the real estate part because I'm interested in the real estate.
That's cool. I actually love talking about real estate. So I can always get sidetracked easily.
Okay. So for your own story, you started building wealth by having your rentals. You've got passive income. Well, is rental income passive? Because you do still have to manage and do stuff. Do you consider it passive?
So it's more passive now. I cashed out and I am in like an even more passive. I think it's as passive as you want to be. And I think for me, like I was willing to do the work. Like I wanted the sweat equity, right? So I wanted more of the cash was more important to me to save to buy the next property than it was to totally have it passive. So it's really, you know, because you can hire a management company, you know, you can get somebody to do everything, right? Like I would usually paint when we would redo a property just because because I would like write intentions on the wall under the paint. So that was like my thing, you know, I'm like, this space is sacred. This space is full of love, you know, like I would do my like kind of
awesome things. Renters who never mess anything up.
Yes. Like, you know, just like fill the place with love. So that was like one of the things I would usually choose to do on my own, but I could have hired that out. And I did have a contractor do a lot of it. So it's really where you are. And for me in the beginning, I did as much as possible because the cash was more important than the time. But as it grew, like the time has become more important. I'm willing to like come up with a little bit less of the passive income to have more time.
Right. And speaking of passive income, right before we hit record, I was asking you about the best-selling author part of your bio. And you told me that you have 7 Amazon titles. I mean, that to me is much more passive income because like you write the book once and then maybe set up, you know, some marketing, some funnels or whatever, but you don't have to write the book again. It gets sold over and over and over. Tell us about that side of your business because that's something else I'm really interested in. I want to know, how did you do that? How'd you write 7 books?
So I wrote them, I just sort of followed the process. I wrote them with the author incubator. So I followed their process and I really learned when I wrote the second one. I wrote it in 3 days. It was actually called Investing Secrets for Champagne Life. It's my real estate investing book.
Oh, great. I'm going to have to check it out. We'll put some links to these books in here.
I wrote that one in 3 days. And what I realized is I write a much better book in 3 days. She was actually testing out her process. Like, could somebody write a book in 3 days? And so I had the idea on a Friday, pitched it to her on a Sunday. She's like, yeah. And I was like, I'll just tag along because they were in California. And so like, I just followed their schedule from home. And for me, I wrote a much better book and it makes it easy. Like for me, it was way easier to go, okay, these 3 days I'm writing a book and versus, I'm going to try and write a book for like an hour on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Right.
So that's one of the ways. Yeah.
Block time. Do you mind if I ask how many words it ended up being?
I think that their average of them is about 18,000, somewhere between 16 and 20. Yeah.
Okay. So that's like a nice informational Kindle instructional book.
They're like this thick, like, you know, when they're printed. And so my goal was always like, you could read it while you're on an airplane and get off and go to work. Like you could read it while you were there the whole time, you know, so you didn't have to stop and start, and you could get off and you could start applying whatever I was teaching.
Okay. Well, so are all of the books instructional books like that and kind of on the short side?
Yeah, except for then I also have a novella. So I did my first novella in January. So
that's exciting.
Yeah. Which is a super fun beach read if anyone's looking for like a fun thing to put on their Kindle for,
what's it called? What's the novella?
It's called Choose Me.
Choose Me. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. We'll put links. We'll just put links to all your books because I'm really curious. Like, actually, I was talking to, do you know who Kat Laturso is?
I've heard of her. Yeah.
So she's a coach who is very like fitness oriented. And I have to be honest, like when I first ran into her stuff, she's very like, she's Australian, kind of brash, very in your face.
Yes.
Like she says badass all the time. And I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. Like it didn't quite mesh with my feel for like life coaching and stuff. But I heard her say once on some podcast or something that she got to where she had $10,000 a month in regular income from her Amazon books. And I love the Smarter Artist guys, you know, who the Write, Publish, Repeat. I'm on my own book right now. And they had this little kind of code to look at the ranking of a book and guesstimate within a certain range how many they sell a day. So I went and looked, and she had 40 titles on Amazon.
Yeah.
And all of them were ranked to where she was probably doing somewhere between 80 and 100 downloads a day.
Awesome.
At $2.99. And I was like, that is definitely within reality that she could be making $10,000 a month just on her Amazon downloads. Obviously she has, you know, all this other stuff she does, but it just shocked me. I did not think that Amazon authors really were making that much money off of their books, but you
totally can.
Yeah.
And I think it's what like my titles don't make that, but I also write them for a different purpose, you know. But yeah, totally you can. Like I think there's a lot of people that, you know, make that. Yeah.
And just the time that it takes to write, 7 books, or, you know, I think her 40, I did buy 2 of them just to test what they were. And they are very much like her blog posts it's like the blog posts that adhere to one theme overall.
Right.
Kind of packed together. So it was like 2 hours a day of writing for so many days. And it wasn't super edited. It wasn't super polished, but it was not crap either. Right. So I was like, well, that's perfectly legitimate. People, you know, every so many months you get another book out, I guess. If you can write one in 3 days, think how often you could get a new book out.
I know. It's so weird. Like, so I was, cause then the editing and getting all the other stuff, it would take about 3 months, right. You know, in total. But like, I haven't started a book in like 4 months. Like the novella was January, so it's been like 5 months now since I've been in the process of a book, and that's the first time in the last 2 years I'm kind of like, which I've got another one in my head. Like I'm gonna schedule the 2 days to like crank it out and get that done. And
nice.
Yeah,
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've hit 2 parts of your sort of financial overview. You've got your real estate stuff. You've got your books that are bringing in income and clients, I assume, too.
Yes.
Because I haven't actually spoken with Angela myself, but I've interviewed a couple other people who've gone through that same process with the author incubator. So I feel like the focus with her often is to write books to bring clients. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So now let's talk about your client business. What does that look like?
So it looks like, you know, my entry program is Manifest 10K, which I've just added, that you can go through it and you can get coaching and support. Like before, it's been sort of, you know, I'd pop in every once in a while and I'd give coaching, or in the beginning I did a lot more coaching, but I just don't have the time and the space to do it. And it was sort of hit and miss. Like if someone was committed, you know, if you coach them like, hey, you didn't really quite hit all the points of this assignment, you know, some people would run with it and some people wouldn't. And so I like people to be a little more committed now. So I have a level where I support people going through that course, which is really awesome. And then I do a workshop called, sometimes it's called Double Your Business or Your Enchanted Future. Like, but really, you know, it's about getting in touch with your future self. And what I teach people is how to really tap into who they are in 5 years from now in their business and let that person lead the way. because that person's dealing with other things. That person's already solved every problem that you have in your business right now, and they're doing bigger things. Like their energy isn't spent worrying where the next client is coming from. It's spent on, okay, like we're going to grow this way, or we're going to do this. And it's really, so when I help people tap into that, their business is somebody just posted today. My business doubled in 4 months after doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, because, yeah. So yeah. And I love that. Like that's, I love it all. Like I love money, but that's just an extension of sort of the money is the baseline. Like the money mindset is the baseline. And then I help people just take it to that whole other level. Okay, we got that under control. Like now what are we going to do to blow it up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sounds great. Do you do one-on-one work as well?
I don't do a lot of one-on-one work. I do mostly group coaching, because I just have found that I'm a better coach in a group for whatever reason. And I love the opportunity to learn from others. I love, when somebody goes through something and I coach them through it, when someone goes through it 2 months later, they don't necessarily need coaching because it's in their brain. Oh, they're like, oh yeah, Cassie said this was happened. This is what I need to do. And they can just get through it faster. So I think there's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah. Learning from each other. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if people like what they're hearing, what can they do? First, what are some tips that they could use right now today when they get off of this podcast that could help them? And then let's talk about where they go to find more from you. So if someone is struggling right now and they're like, oh my God, manifest 10K. That just sounds like I'm barely making the groceries, enough money for the groceries and my bills right now. Like, how would I manifest 10K? Where would it come from? What would you tell them?
Well, I tell them, before I get into tips, I would tell them like your job is to just visualize, tap into, imagine, play with your imagination and what it would be like if there was $10,000 in your account, right? Like play with the possibility, like what would you do if somebody just walked up and handed you $10,000, right? Is to really get in that space of play and possibility. Because what I found and what I teach a lot is the more you try and how it, like the more you try and figure it out. I work with a lot of recovering how addicts. We try and figure out every step of the way. The how is really not your job. Like your job is to get crystal clear on what that looks like and start making the small changes to become that person. So one of my favorite tips, so I can give a couple, that's one, is really just start playing with possibility. Don't worry about the how, like don't, just play, be in the space of play. And use your imagination for like the good stuff instead of the worry for a little while. But one of the tips I love and I hear all the time that I teach people that really changes things is the words you use. So I don't use the word spend ever. I always use the word invest. Because, and I've heard this from, like moms growing to the grocery store and, one mom, she's like, when I'd go to the grocery store, I'd feel guilty, even though it was for food, spending $200. But when I started saying invest and in implying I'm investing in food for my family for the next 2 or 3 weeks, like I felt better. There was no guilt. It was like, yeah, heck yes, this is the investment I'm making, and that just even starts to open up the space to feel better about money, to feel more in control, to feel like the guide of your money versus, money being in control of you. And so I think if there's anything somebody could start doing today, that's one of the biggest things. That also, it helps with that. That's one of the things when I stopped, going to fill up that bag of crap off the clearance rack is like, it was $200, but it was spending. It wasn't investing in anything that I loved or investing in a long-term payout, and so your brain just naturally starts to behave differently when you use the word invest versus spend.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, especially with groceries, I was thinking I'm investing in the health of my children.
Yes, right? Or and that really helped, like if people, like especially if you want to buy organic, like it's like this is my investment in our well-being or my children's well-being.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, what else do you got?
What else do I got? So one of the biggest things I teach is that you want to be the person who has money. So a lot of times we try and do all these things to think we're going to manifest money or draw more money into our life or be better. But you really want to step into that being. Like, how would the person think? If you had $10,000 in your bank account right now, what would you be thinking about? Right? You might be planning a trip. You might be thinking about, how can I invest this in real estate? You might be thinking like, oh, cool, I can go take this class, and you'd be exploring that class, or you'd be planning that trip. Like, spend some time in that, being the person who has that money instead of trying to get to be the person that has that money. Because you really do, when you are at a place where you feel good about your money, you have enough money, you think about things differently, right? Like, you're like, oh, cool, I have money, I can invest in real estate. And so then you're learning about real estate, right? You're talking to financial planners, you're doing all this stuff differently than what you're doing now. And so just practice being that person. One of the other great tips that people love is, go experience some of the abundance that you want to experience. Like, don't wait until you can afford the $100 dinner. Find out when happy hour is. Go feel the ambiance, right? Just have a drink, or a drink and an appetizer if you can, and really feel what that experience is like, so that you know, rather than putting it off until you can do the whole 6-course meal.
I like that. That's good. Or maybe try on the fancier dress than you feel ready to buy,
right? Yeah. Go to the store one day and actually go take to the dressing room what you love, instead of what you looked at the price tag and were like, oh, well, I would buy this if I like it. Like, just grab what you like and practice, I
like that. That's good. So if people want to get some more experience of you and find out more, let's see. I'm really curious about, here in your bio, I read about your Manifest 10K program.
Yeah.
Explain about the investment in it and how this works, because I've never seen anyone price something quite like this, and I'm fascinated.
Awesome. I've never seen anybody do it, but the way that it got that price was, I wrote the course. I was inspired to write the course, and I was like, well, what's it going to cost? And I was like, it's going to be pay after you manifest. Like, it just came to me. And so now you invest $1 up front, and that's basically just saying I'm in, right? And then you, on the honor system, you pay 10% of what you manifest over and above what you normally would. So if you normally get 5 clients a month, and all of a sudden you have 7, you invest on that 2 client difference. Or if someone all of a sudden, you get somebody lowers your car insurance, and that's $1,000, and you pay, $100 for that. And it's all really on the honor system. Like, I don't follow up with, I don't ever ask. I'm like, hey, when it's and I love that. And for me, that meant I had to have a super strong foundation and mindset to be like, cool. And I know money, and people always send me money, so it's really fun.
That is fascinating. So if someone actually manifests 10K more than they would normally make in a month, they should send you $1,000.
Yeah. Right? Yes. Yeah. And they do.
Wow. That is great. I'm so curious about the course now. I think I could invest $1 in that and see what happens.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And for those that are like, because for some people that's cool. And for some people it's like, it messes with their mind a little bit. Like, you can pay $100 up front, and if you're like, well, I don't know how I would track it. If that stresses you out, I put that option, because people were like, I think it's messing with my mind. So I'm like, oh, well, then you can just take care of it up front, and we can serve everybody.
Though I think it is a really good point to track it, to notice exactly what is your normal income? Are you tracking your normal income? I actually have this tracker. It's from Denise Duffield Thomas. I don't know if you know her.
I do.
Have you seen her money tracker?
No.
So she made an app. I've asked a few times, I would love for it to be changed a little, but so it tracks the blue.
Yeah.
It only has 2 colors. I wish you could track multiple colors, because I like to track where money came from and what it looks like.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a teeny pink line you can see there, and that's free stuff, because she wants you to track, so at Starbucks, someone paid my drink one time. And I often do like to go ahead and pass that on, but I was still I still did get a free drink, so I'm going to put the value in here. So she asked you to track in there, not just income, straight up income, but also value. Like if someone buys you a drink or gives you a present, or, whatever it is. And then, because in terms of when people are looking at manifesting, sometimes it's not straight money. It's what you want.
Yes.
Instead of going through the buying process, someone gives it to you or something.
Absolutely.
But I think if we don't track what's coming to us, then it's hard to tell when there is a big difference and what made the what am I doing that's causing change?
Yes.
If we're not tracking, yeah.
Well, and if you're not tracking, you actually don't even clue your brain in either that things should be getting better, right? So let's say that somebody makes 4,000 and they're not tracking it and they make 6,000 in a month. They're not going to experience that $2,000 difference because their brain isn't aware of it, right? And it's probably going to fly out the door the same as the 4,000 would.
Right. And if you knew it was there, you could put it in that real estate investment pot to get my next condo or my first condo. Or, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Thanks. Yeah. Tracking it is super fun.
Like the way you're charging for this seems so confident too. Like you are so confident that they will manifest something that you're going to get money back from it without charging up front. That's amazing. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. I love it too. And I had to when that idea popped in my head, I was like, all right, you got to make sure you're clear on this and you're clean on it. And I just did. I mean, it didn't take a lot of work for me because of the place I was at and because it was so inspired that I'm like, yeah, I want this to be in the world where you get to show up and you get to invest and learn, and then you get to pay based on your results.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so we will definitely put a link to that. We're going to put links to your books. And you also have a free Change Your Money Story cheat sheet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that, and we'll put a link to it too.
Okay, cool. So it's just really, a lot of people have a money story that they created along their life. And so as I've seen people go through the course, I've seen some of the changes that really help change that story. And so it's just a cheat sheet that tells you one of the ways is the way you talk. We talked about invest versus spend. So that is one of the things on there. And then I give other tips about, how to have different conversations or, different things to focus on that will help you change your story and support changing your story.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cassie. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you. It's been great to be here. And thank you for letting me talk about real estate. I always love to get the opportunity to do that.
Sure. Well, I think you are a great example of what you're talking about teaching people, building wealth in these different ways, having income to support what you want to do, not needing it desperately every month. That's where I think a lot of us want to get to.
Yes. And so hopefully something I said today will be helpful in that to your audience.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Cassie. It's been great having you. Bye.